packing our bags, boarding a flight, and going back in time to the glamorous age of 1950s travel. Air travel in the 1950s wasn't just a way to get from point A to point B. It was, in and of itself, a glamorous experience reserved for the ultra-wealthy who could afford it. However, even if you couldn't afford it, the perfume companies of the day still came out with ways to capitalize off of the glamour of travel, even for those who couldn't necessarily afford a plane ticket. And that's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode of the Fragrance Report. If this is your first time listening, my name is Anya. I love fragrances. I talk about them here on this podcast and on YouTube, as well as other social media platforms. This podcast focuses on beauty and fragrance history throughout the ages. If you're interested, we launch a new episode of this podcast every Wednesday on Spotify and on YouTube. I'm excited about the topic of this episode because there's something kind of glamorous and lost about the way we traveled back in the 1950s. It's interesting looking back on the glamorous age of travel because when we see these images and when we see the way they traveled back then and we compare it to fighting for legroom on planes in the modern day, it seems like a complete 180 shift. But in this episode, we're going to be talking about the glamour of travel, and we're also going to talk about some of the most renowned perfume companies and how they decided to create scents and experiences based around this whole concept of air travel, which at that point was quite new. It was very new and novel for normal people to be able to travel commercially. So this was something that was very glamorous and newfangled, and it was an opportunity for these companies to capitalize off of that. So that's what we're going to be covering today. So let's get into it. Let's kick things off with some favorites, starting off with Elizabeth Taylor's Passion. I've been wearing this so many times throughout the past week. I absolutely adore this fragrance. It's one of my favorites. It's a spicy, balsamic, animalic sandalwood musk. It has a whole host of notes. If you check the pyramid, it is quite extensive. But what really stands out to me is that the fact that this is kind of like a powdery vanilla with a lot of animalic sandalwood musky facets. It's loud, it's commanding, it's intense, but I love it. And there's something about it that gives me a lot of comfort and a lot of self-assurance. So I wear this whenever I want to feel extra confident and extra me, kind of femme fatale. So this is Elizabeth Taylor's Passion. Some people love it, some people hate it. I happen to absolutely adore it. Then we have a new fragrance that's completely different from Elizabeth Taylor's Passion. This is a perfume that I actually blind bought. I'm probably going to talk about it in a Viage video. I might have already mentioned it in the video I posted yesterday, but this is Choco Musk Marshmallow. This is a flanker of Al Rahab's original Choco Musk fragrance. This is the marshmallow version. It has your typical kind of cacao, marshmallow, strawberry, vanilla combination, but it has kind of that strawberry marshmallow accord with a bit of additional musk. You can definitely pick that out, at least I can, and I love it. I've been wearing it layered with, let me show you, Idole Nectar by Lancôme. This is a lovely fragrance. If you're unfamiliar, it's a flanker of the original Idole perfume, but instead of just that signature rose, they have added in some caramel popcorn notes, making it a very interesting take on a gourmand version of a rose. And combined with Marshmallow by Al Rahab, this is chef's kiss, so good. I love this combination, highly recommend it. I should probably mention it on TikTok at some point because I love talking about new layering combinations with you guys over there. But this together, so good. Then I have to share with you this next fragrance. I've been wearing this a lot more often these days, and I'm contemplating getting myself a larger size. This is Orabelle's Salted Muse, a vegetal, salty, aromatic, woody fragrance that just smells very green, but it also has a saltiness to it that I find very refreshing. I believe there's also sandalwood here. I wear this a lot. I adore this perfume. I've been wearing it throughout this week, and it's just an oil concentration, or it's an oil form, so you can wear it layered with other scents, but this is just a very comforting fragrance to me, and I've just been naturally gravitating towards this. But yes, those are some key favorites that I've been loving this past week, but let's get into the rest of the episode. After World War II, passenger travel had surged to new heights. Eventually, by 1955, for the first time, it would be found that more people in the United States had traveled by air than by train. And by 1957, airliners had replaced ocean liners as the preferred means of crossing the Atlantic. From 1950 to 1951, British and American newspapers and magazines were running advertisements for a new airline, the forerunner for today's British Airways airline. This was the British Overseas Airways Corporation, also known as BOAC. BOAC had a non-stop New York to London Monarch Deluxe flight on their brand new double-deck American Boeing 377 Stratocruiser, and this was considered one of the pinnacles of air travel luxury. What did this cost? Well, you could spend about $400 to over $600 depending on the season and the availability provided. In today's money, that would be between $5,000 to $8,000. So what was flying like in the 1950s? The space in the economy class cabin of a 1950 airplane resembled the business class of today in terms of space. Passengers could enjoy more excellent legroom in spacious cabins with wide seats. Reclining seats wouldn't have bothered the person behind you, and even sleeping berths could just be popped open from the overhead compartments. If you were a customer in the 1950s, you could spend your time eating meals that were as good as anything you would be served in a fine dining restaurant. Flight attendants used to prepare pre-cooked in-flight meals in the galley, and the food was kept refrigerated in dry ice and heated up in electric ovens. Rather than pre-packaged in tinfoil, steaks were cut seatside. Dinner was often a multi-course meal with fine food items like caviar, lobster being served alongside fresh fruit, cheese platters, desserts, and fine wines. Full-scale bars were also available on board. The era of mass travel had truly been kick-started, but unfortunately, this was not available to everyone. African Americans could choose to fly, but few did. Many airport facilities were segregated, and discrimination was widespread. While the airlines were not legally segregated, airports often were. Throughout the South, inferior airport accommodations discouraged many African Americans from flying. And unfortunately, until the civil rights movement began to bring about change, air travel remained mostly for white people. I think whenever we look at advertising, especially from this time, it's really clear that there are several demographics missing from these images, and it's important not to gloss over that, especially when we reflect on the society that was present in the 1950s. It's important to note that the luxurious experience cultivated by BOAC and other airlines did not just extend to the services and the amenities provided, but also to the appearance and the grooming of the stewardesses themselves. Stewardesses were not only assisted by Elizabeth Arden consultants, but received additional training at the Lucy Clayton Modeling School in London. BOAC made sure that their customers had everything they needed, including very well thought out toiletry sets, with each passenger being handed a Speedbird overnight bag filled with the essentials. Ladies were given the Speedbird Beauty Kit, which was created for the airline by Elizabeth Arden. She had signed a long-term agreement with BOAC in 1949. By this time, she was a household name worldwide, presiding over a global beauty empire with salons and consultation centers in multiple countries. She had British roots and a passion for air travel, making her the perfect collaborator for this airline. The men's grooming needs were covered with products from Yardley. The travel set itself came in a compact plastic case and included essentials like Elizabeth Arden cleansing milk, Velva balm, lotion, padded cream, illusion face powder, and a bluegrass flower mist fragrance. You were also provided with toothpaste, a toothbrush, tissues, and cotton pads. This was available at a department store if you did not necessarily want to fly for $2.50. In today's money, that would be $32. In the 1950s, commercial air travel was still new and a luxury reserved for the ultra wealthy. If you were getting on a plane, you traveled with the idea of looking your most glamorous. People wore gloves, hats. They were expected to experience glamorous meals, crystal, champagne, and roomy cabins, which is, of course, a far cry from what we experience today. But perfume companies noticed this. They noticed that there was a new opportunity for them to launch glamorous and luxurious experiences through scent. So they started to create perfumes that promised a vacation in a bottle. Perfume ads during the 1950s also reflected this. Advertisements would include palm trees, beaches, far-flung destinations that were glamorous and inaccessible for some, but also accessible for others. However, you could also get a perfume to evoke that similar sense of glamour. One popular perfume in the 1950s was Hawaiian White Ginger Perfume. This was advertised as being made in Hawaii, and it was launched by the company Brownie of Honolulu. The company had been founded in 1947 by Charles Brown. He was a cosmetic chemist and electronics engineer from Detroit. He very cleverly figured out a way to submerge a live flower inside a perfume bottle, creating this very perfume, which included notes of plumiera, orchid, carnation, and lani, which is a variety of the plumeria flower, also known as ginger lily. This perfume was a perfect example of a product that tourists could buy in Hawaii and then take home to their families as a souvenir. As we mentioned before, if you were getting on a plane in the 1950s, you were supposed to look your best, but also smell your best. Also, travel and shopping became very much intertwined in the 1950s, which led to the implementation and expanded use of duty-free shopping in airports. The very first duty-free had actually opened in 1947 at Shannon International Airport, located in County Clare, Ireland. Interestingly enough, this precursor was a rapid and resounding success, with many airports worldwide, including in the Soviet Union, rapidly following suit. Passengers were offered catalogs where they could choose alcohol, perfumes, and other souvenirs as gifts. The options for women were decidedly more broad than what was provided for men, but as you can see, there were many options to purchase. Airport gift shops and counters began to stock perfumes that were inspired by far-flung destinations that were supposed to be gifts for loved ones or even mementos for travelers to buy for themselves. And even if you couldn't necessarily afford to go to these destinations by air travel, you could also go to a department store and get some of these kind of travel-inspired perfumes that mimicked the experience of going to these far-flung destinations. The 1950s might be long gone, and the 1950s and the idea of glamorous travel as we saw it back then might be long gone, but there are certain echoes of what we did in the 1950s that are still present today, such as duty-free shopping, associating different perfumes with different destinations. Fragrances like Dolce & Gabbana Light Blue, for instance, are associated with these far-off destinations, which add a sense of glamour to the perfume. Imagery of France, Italy, tropical destinations are commonly associated with some of the most notorious scents that are available today. And there is a sense of glamour and escapism when it comes to associating a perfume with the idea of travel. And yet it's yet another way for brands to capitalize off of this nostalgia, capitalize off of this aspiration through perfume. So I hope this was interesting to you. Definitely let me know. Are you someone that... I do also want to note, if you are looking back at I do think it's important to know that even though the travel experience in the 1950s looks like it was super glamorous, this was something that was still reserved for the ultra wealthy. If you were not wealthy, you probably wouldn't even be able to get on a plane in the first place because the tickets were so expensive. Now, the travel experience is decidedly less glamorous. It's more stressful. We don't get legroom. We don't get champagne and lobster served in economy, but still we do get the opportunity to get on a plane and go somewhere, even though it's becoming increasingly uncomfortable. But yes, as always, thank you for listening to the end of this episode of the Fragrance Report. I hope you found it interesting and enjoyable, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye. This episode's music was brought to you by Kevin McLeod over at Incompetech. This is Beauty Flow by Kevin McLeod at incompetech.com and is licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license.